14 Golden Age actresses who regretted not having children. During Hollywood's Golden Age, actresses faced an impossible choice that most male stars never confronted: career or family. Studio contracts often explicitly forbade marriage and pregnancy, with clauses requiring approval for relationships and immediate termination upon pregnancy. Those who defied these restrictions risked being blacklisted entirely. For ambitious women determined to build careers in an era with limited opportunities, motherhood often seemed an unaffordable luxury that would effectively end their professional lives. While their male counterparts freely married and fathered children without career interruption, these women postponed starting families, assuming they could simply have children later when they had achieved financial security and professional stability. But for many of Hollywood's most celebrated actresses, later never came. As they entered middle age, these women discovered that their postponed dreams of motherhood had quietly slipped away, personal loss made even more painful by society's judgment that viewed childless women as somehow incomplete or selfish, regardless of their professional accomplishments. But here's what makes these actresses' stories truly surprising. Their private feelings about childlessness were often dramatically different from their carefully crafted public personas. While studios portrayed these women as glamorous, independent figures who had it all, many privately struggled with profound grief over their unwitting sacrifice. Personal diaries, letters, and late-life interviews reveal how deeply many of these seemingly fulfilled stars longed for the children they never had. Even more unexpected, several of these actresses attempted to adopt children later in life, only to be rejected by adoption agencies that deemed Hollywood stars unsuitable mothers due to their unconventional lifestyles and previous divorces. Perhaps most poignant of all is how many channeled their maternal instincts into alternative forms of caregiving, establishing foundations for children's causes, becoming surrogate mothers to younger performers, or creating lasting art that addressed the complex emotions surrounding their childlessness. Behind their glamorous public images were women grappling with one of life's most profound experiences. So who were these Golden Age actresses who privately mourned the children they never had, and how did they navigate the conflict between their professional ambitions and their unfulfilled maternal desires? Let's explore 14 legendary performers whose glamorous careers masked private regret over postponed motherhood. 1. Katharine Hepburn, the great regret behind the independence. Katharine Hepburn's fiercely independent public image made her a feminist icon. With her outspoken manner, preference for pants over dresses, and refusal to play by Hollywood's rules, Hepburn seemed the embodiment of the woman who wanted career over conventional domesticity. This carefully cultivated persona masked a more complex reality that Hepburn only revealed in her final years. Hepburn's 26-year relationship with Spencer Tracy never resulted in marriage or children, primarily because Tracy, a devout Catholic, refused to divorce his wife. What few people realized was that Hepburn had actually become pregnant with Tracy's child in the early years of their relationship. In a 1990 interview she gave in her 80s, Hepburn revealed that she had terminated the pregnancy, believing that having a child would end both their careers and destroy Tracy's carefully maintained public image as a family man. "I wanted children," Hepburn confessed to biographer A. Scott Berg shortly before her death. "I just couldn't see how to make it work. Spencer had his family. I had my career. A baby would have ruined everything for everyone." This stark calculation, sacrificing potential motherhood for professional survival, haunted Hepburn in her later years. What makes Hepburn's case particularly poignant is how she channeled her unrealized maternal instincts. Throughout her career, she became a mentor to younger actresses, with many describing her as a mother figure who provided guidance both professionally and personally. She also became deeply involved with children's charities, particularly those supporting education for girls, creating opportunities for younger generations that she herself had never experienced. In her 1991 autobiography, Me, Hepburn wrote a passage that stunned many fans who had accepted her seemingly content childless persona. "Sometimes in the quiet of night, I wonder about the children I might have had. I think I would have been a good mother, strict but fair. It's the greatest regret of my life, but you can't have everything, and I chose my career. Was I right? I'll never know." 2. Greta Garbo, the recluse who longed for family. Greta Garbo's famous desire to be alone has been misinterpreted for decades as reflecting a preference for isolation. In reality, Garbo's retreat from public life masked a profound disappointment over her childlessness. a private grief she shared only with her closest confidants. Garbo's most significant romantic relationship was with actor John Gilbert, whom she left at the altar in 1927. What remained secret until the publication of Gilbert's diaries decades later was that Garbo had been pregnant at the time, suffering a miscarriage shortly before the planned wedding. According to Gilbert's account, this loss devastated Garbo, convincing her that motherhood wasn't meant to be for her. Swedish film historian Ingrid Bergman, no relation to the actress, discovered correspondence between Garbo and her sister Alva that revealed her ongoing desire for children. In a 1932 letter, Garbo wrote, "The studio forbids it now, but someday I will have my little ones. A house full of children is my real dream, though no one in Hollywood would believe it." As Garbo aged and retirement allowed her freedom from studio constraints, she made several attempts to adopt. In 1941, she applied to adopt a Swedish orphan, but was rejected because of her unmarried status. In 1954, she again pursued adoption, but was deemed unsuitable by agencies concerned about her reclusiveness and unconventional lifestyle. Garbo's friend Sam Green revealed after her death that her apartment contained a hidden room filled with children's toys, books, and furniture, a nursery for children who never arrived. She would sometimes sit in that room alone for hours, Green recalled. She called it the might-have-been room. What makes Garbo's childlessness particularly tragic is how it reinforced her isolation. In a rare 1966 interview, she observed, "When you grow old without children, you have no one who really belongs to you. That's when the loneliness truly begins." Her famous reclusiveness, rather than reflecting contentment with solitude, may have been a defense mechanism against the family life she couldn't achieve. 3. Bette Davis. The career that consumed motherhood. Bette Davis's ferocious ambition and legendary work ethic made her one of Hollywood's most accomplished actresses, with 10 Academy Award nominations and 2 wins. This professional dedication came at significant personal cost, particularly regarding motherhood. Davis did adopt a daughter, Barbara B.D. Sherry, in 1947, and later had a biological daughter, Margot, with her third husband, William Grant Sherry. However, Margot was born with severe brain damage that required institutional care for most of her life. What most people don't know is that Davis had wanted a large family, planning to have at least 4 children, according to her early interviews. Her first marriage to Harmon Nelson ended partly over his insistence that they couldn't afford children on his musician's salary, while Davis was the primary breadwinner. Her second marriage to Arthur Farnsworth ended with his accidental death just as they were planning to start a family. By the time Davis was finally in a position to have children in her late 30s, she faced both fertility challenges and the severe health issues affecting Margot. What made Davis's situation particularly painful was her estrangement from her adopted daughter B.D., who published a scathing memoir, My Mother's Keeper, in 1985, depicting Davis as an abusive alcoholic. Davis was devastated by this public rejection, writing in her own memoir, "The maternal loves of my life have brought me the greatest joy and the greatest pain." In private correspondence with her friend Olivia de Havilland, Davis expressed regret about prioritizing her career over having children earlier. "I waited too long, focused too much on work. By the time I was ready to be a mother, my body was not. Then the one healthy child I managed to adopt has turned against me. It seems cruel punishment for putting my career first for so many years." Film historian Janine Bassinger notes that Davis represents the classic dilemma of the ambitious woman of her era. The professional window for actresses was so narrow and precarious that having children early meant career suicide. Waiting meant risking the ability to have children at all. This impossible choice haunted Davis throughout her later years. 4. Barbara Stanwyck. The orphan who couldn't have children. Barbara Stanwyck's own traumatic childhood profoundly shaped her desire for motherhood and her heartbreak at never achieving it. Orphaned at age 4, when her mother died and her father abandoned the family, Stanwyck grew up in foster homes and with her older sister. This early deprivation created both a fierce desire for family and a determination to achieve financial security before having children. Stanwyck's first marriage to Frank Fay included a serious attempt at parenthood through adoption. The couple adopted a son, Dion, in 1932, but the marriage deteriorated into alcoholism and alleged abuse. After their divorce, Fay received custody of Dion, an extraordinarily rare outcome in the 1930s that devastated Stanwyck. According to her closest friends, losing her adopted son created a wound that never healed. What few people know is that Stanwyck subsequently discovered she was infertile due to an untreated infection she had contracted during her impoverished youth. This medical certainty that she could never bear biological children transformed what had been a postponement of motherhood into a permanent impossibility. Her second marriage to Robert Taylor seemed a fresh opportunity for family, but Taylor didn't want children, creating tension throughout their relationship. According to Taylor's diaries, Stanwyck regularly brought up adoption, while he consistently refused, believing children would interfere with their careers. Stanwyck channeled her maternal instincts into becoming a mentor to younger actresses, including Nancy Reagan, whom she advised both professionally and personally for decades. In private, however, friends reported that Stanwyck kept a room in her home filled with children's toys and books, items she would purchase whenever she saw something a child might enjoy, despite having no children in her life. In a 1973 interview, Stanwyck made a rare public acknowledgement of her private grief. "Not having children is my biggest regret. All these achievements, awards, the money, in the end, they mean nothing compared to the children I might have had. I would trade it all for one child who called me mother." 5. Marlene Dietrich, the mother who wanted more. Unlike many on our list, Marlene Dietrich did have one child, her daughter Maria Riva, born in 1924. What's less known is Dietrich's desire for a larger family and her private grief over secondary infertility that prevented her from having more children. Dietrich's relationship with her only child was extraordinarily complex. She was simultaneously intensely attached to Maria and frequently absent due to career demands. Maria later described being both the center of her mother's world and regularly abandoned to nannies and boarding schools, while Dietrich pursued her career. According to Maria's memoir, Dietrich experienced several miscarriages after her birth, including a particularly devastating loss in 1929, just as Dietrich's international career was taking off with The Blue Angel. Studio contracts explicitly prohibited pregnancy, forcing Dietrich to keep these losses secret, grieving privately while maintaining her public persona as the sultry, sophisticated sex symbol. What makes Dietrich's case particularly poignant is how she attempted to create a surrogate extended family. Throughout her career, she informally adopted younger performers, particularly young women new to Hollywood. She would invite them to live in her home, cook for them, and provide career advice, creating a makeshift family to compensate for the larger biological family she couldn't have. In letters to her husband, Rudolf Sieber, from whom she was separated but never divorced, Dietrich repeatedly mentioned her desire for more children. In a 1938 letter, she wrote, "The studio would have me believe I can have either children or my career. Why must women always choose? Men never do. It seems the cruelest joke, to be famous and adored by millions, yet denied the simple joy of more children." Dietrich's later years were marked by extreme reclusiveness, refusing to be photographed as she aged. According to her grandson, Peter Riva, this withdrawal wasn't simply vanity, but depression connected to her life's regrets. She would say, "I should have had more children instead of more films," Peter recalled. In the end, she felt her priorities had been wrong. As we continue exploring these legendary actresses, we discover how their unfulfilled maternal desires shape not just their personal lives, but their artistic choices and legacy. The conflict between professional ambition and biological desires created not only personal regret, but influenced how these women approached their roles, their relationships with younger performers, and ultimately how they were remembered by history. 6. Joan Crawford, adoption, rejection, and motherhood controversies. Joan Crawford's relationship with motherhood is among Hollywood's most controversial, largely due to her adopted daughter Christina's memoir, Mommy Dearest, which portrayed Crawford as abusive. This public narrative has overshadowed the complex reality of Crawford's desperate desire for children and the systematic obstacles she faced. What many people don't realize is that Crawford's journey to motherhood began with heartbreak over her inability to have biological children. After multiple miscarriages with her second husband, Franchot Tone, Crawford consulted specialists who determined that uterine damage from illegal abortions early in her career, performed at the studio's insistence to avoid contract violations, had left her unable to carry a pregnancy to term. Crawford's first adoption attempt in 1939 was rejected because she was single, as adoption agencies routinely denied applications from unmarried women. This rejection devastated Crawford, who wrote in her diary, "They say I'm unfit to be a mother because I'm not married, yet they don't question the fitness of the married couples who abandon their children to orphanages. The hypocrisy is unbearable." She eventually succeeded in adopting her daughter Christina, in 1940, using private channels and her celebrity influence to circumvent normal procedures. She later adopted 3 more children, Christopher, Kathy, and Cindy, creating the family she had long desired. However, the circumstances of these adoptions have raised ethical questions, with allegations that Crawford used her wealth and connections to essentially purchase children through questionable intermediaries. What makes Crawford's case particularly complicated is the contrast between her public image as a devoted mother — she regularly appeared in women's magazines discussing motherhood — and the private reality described by Christina and Christopher, though her younger daughters Kathy and Cindy defended Crawford, describing a strict but loving mother. Film historian Molly Haskell suggests that Crawford's extreme approach to motherhood, alternating between excessive devotion and alleged cruelty, may reflect her lack of models for normal maternal behavior, having been abandoned by her own father and raised by a struggling single mother. Her desperate desire for children, coupled with her lack of preparation for actual motherhood, created a volatile situation. Whatever the truth about Crawford's mothering, what remains clear is that her pursuit of motherhood was determined and persistent, suggesting that having children represented a profound emotional need rather than the publicity stunt some critics have suggested. 7. Claudette Colbert, The Secret Infertility Struggle. Claudette Colbert projected an image of sophisticated glamour throughout her career, with her perfect comic timing in films like It Happened One Night, 1934, establishing her as one of Hollywood's most reliable stars. Behind this polished facade, Colbert endured a private struggle with infertility that she kept hidden from the public throughout her life. Colbert's second marriage to Dr. Joel Pressman seemed ideal for family planning. He was a respected physician, the relationship was stable, and they had sufficient financial security. What remained private until after both their deaths was that the couple had spent over a decade trying to conceive, consulting specialists across the country without success. Colbert's close friend and fellow actress Merle Oberon revealed in her memoirs that Colbert had undergone several experimental fertility treatments in the 1940s, including early hormone therapies that had painful side effects. Claudette endured these treatments stoically, Oberon wrote. She never complained publicly, maintaining her elegant image while suffering considerable physical pain in her quest to become a mother. What makes Colbert's case particularly poignant is how her childlessness influenced her charity work. She became one of Hollywood's most significant benefactors to organizations supporting orphans and unwed mothers, though she never publicly connected these causes to her own inability to have children. The Claudette Colbert Foundation, established in 1945, provided substantial funding for children's homes while maintaining her privacy regarding her personal motivations. Colbert's professionalism and privacy meant she rarely discussed personal matters in interviews. However, in a 1965 conversation with columnist Hedda Hopper, she made a rare acknowledgement of her regret. "Not having children was the great disappointment of my life. People say, 'But you've had such success.' They don't understand that applause doesn't keep you warm at night. I would have traded all my Academy Awards for one baby's smile." After Pressman's death in 1968, Colbert's friend Lillian Gish revealed that Colbert kept a fully furnished nursery in her Holmby Hills home for over 20 years, periodically updating the decor and toys for a child who never arrived. This private shrine to her unfulfilled maternal desires remained unknown to the public during her lifetime. 8. Ginger Rogers, Career Ultimatums and Delayed Dreams. Ginger Rogers' legendary dance partnership with Fred Astaire created some of cinema's most joyful moments. But behind her effervescent screen presence was a woman who faced repeated ultimatums between career and motherhood. Rogers' first marriage at age 17 to Edward Culpepper was briefly interrupted by pregnancy, but she miscarried while dancing in a stage production, an event that her mother, Layla Rogers, convinced her was a sign from God that she should focus on her career before motherhood. This early loss created a pattern of postponement that would characterize Rogers' approach to family planning throughout her prime career years. What few people realize is that Rogers' fifth marriage to William Marshall in 1961 included a serious attempt to adopt. At 50, Rogers believed she had finally achieved sufficient career security and personal stability to become a mother. However, the adoption agency rejected her application, citing her age and multiple divorces as disqualifying factors. Rogers' close friend and choreographer Hermes Pan revealed in an interview that this rejection devastated Rogers. Ginger had spent decades believing there would always be time later for children. When she finally discovered that later had run out, she fell into a depression that lasted nearly 2 years. What makes Rogers' case particularly significant is how her childlessness influenced her later career choices. After the adoption rejection, Rogers shifted her professional focus toward working with children, taking roles in family-oriented films, and eventually teaching dance to disadvantaged youth. According to her autobiography, Ginger, My Story, these activities were an attempt to connect with the maternal part of myself that never found its natural expression. Rogers' regret became more public in her later years. In a 1979 interview, she stated, "My greatest regret is that I listened to people who told me to wait to have children. My mother, studio executives, even my husband's, everyone said, 'There's time later.' Then suddenly, there wasn't time anymore, and that realization was devastating. I would trade a dozen of my films for one child." 9. Rita Hayworth, the mother who lost custody. Rita Hayworth's tragic relationship with motherhood includes both having children and losing them, a different kind of maternal regret that haunted her throughout her life and contributed to her alcoholism and eventual mental decline. Unlike many actresses who postponed motherhood until it was too late, Hayworth did have two daughters, Rebecca Wells with Orson Welles, and Yasmin Aga Khan with Prince Ali Khan. However, her tumultuous career and marriages resulted in losing custody of both girls at various points, losses that devastated her. What makes Hayworth's story particularly heartbreaking is how her own childhood exploitation made her determined to be a protective mother, yet circumstances repeatedly separated her from her children. Having been sexually abused by her father, who had forced her into performing from age 12, Hayworth was intensely motivated to create a different experience for her own daughters. Hayworth's custody battles were extensively covered by the press, with her parenting abilities cruelly questioned. When Prince Ali Khan sued for custody of Yasmin, his legal team portrayed Hayworth as an unstable, hypersexualized woman unsuitable for motherhood, essentially using her screen image against her. Though she ultimately retained custody of Yasmin, the public humiliation deepened her insecurities about motherhood. According to Yasmin Khan's later accounts, Hayworth's greatest sorrow was not being the mother she had hoped to be. "My mother wanted nothing more than to be a full-time, devoted mother," Yasmin recalled, but her career demands, financial pressures, and later her undiagnosed Alzheimer's made that impossible. Her greatest pain was feeling she had failed her children. Film historian Janine Basinger notes that Hayworth represents a different kind of maternal regret, not the absence of children, but the inability to be the mother she desperately wanted to be. The studio system that created her image as the love goddess simultaneously made it nearly impossible for her to live as the devoted mother she aspired to be. In her lucid moments during her final years, as Alzheimer's disease progressively diminished her, Hayworth repeatedly asked about her daughters, often not remembering they were grown women. According to her caregivers, her last coherent words were reportedly, "Tell my girls I'm sorry I couldn't be better for them." 10. Dolores Del Rio, international star with hidden heartbreak. Dolores Del Rio achieved the rare distinction of stardom in both Hollywood and Mexican cinema, with her extraordinary beauty and talent transcending cultural and language barriers. Behind her success lay a private struggle with infertility and childlessness that influenced both her career choices and personal identity. Del Rio's first marriage to Jamie Martinez Del Rio included multiple miscarriages that doctors eventually attributed to a congenital uterine condition. These losses coincided with her rise to Hollywood prominence, creating a painful contrast between her professional success and personal disappointment. What makes Del Rio's case particularly interesting is how differently her childlessness was interpreted in American versus Mexican culture. In Hollywood, her childless status was considered appropriate for a glamorous star, while in Mexico, where motherhood was central to feminine identity, her childlessness was viewed as a tragic flaw that generated considerable public sympathy. Del Rio leveraged this cultural difference when she returned to Mexico in the 1940s, allowing the Mexican press to portray her as a woman who had sacrificed motherhood for art, a narrative that gave purpose to her private sorrow. According to her biographer Linda Hall, Del Rio transformed her inability to have children into a deliberate choice to mother Mexico's film industry instead, becoming a matriarchal figure to younger actresses and filmmakers. This public reimagining of her childlessness masked considerable private grief. Her second husband, production designer Cedric Gibbons, revealed after their divorce that Del Rio had maintained a nursery in their home throughout their marriage, periodically redecorating it for the child they hoped would eventually arrive. In her later years, Del Rio became a significant philanthropist, supporting children's causes in Mexico. She established the Dolores Del Rio Foundation in 1966, to fund orphanages and schools for disadvantaged children. When asked about these charitable efforts, she responded with rare candor about her maternal regrets. "The children I could not have in my home, I try to help in the world. It is not the same as holding your own child, but it gives meaning to what would otherwise be only emptiness." 11. Tallulah Bankhead, the wild child who couldn't mother. Tallulah Bankhead's flamboyant persona and uninhibited lifestyle made her one of Hollywood and Broadway's most notorious figures. Her famous quips, heavy drinking, and openly bisexual affairs created an image of a woman who rejected conventional femininity, including motherhood. This public persona masked Bankhead's private heartbreak over her inability to have children, a grief she concealed behind her outrageous behavior. What few people know is that Bankhead's legendary wild lifestyle began after a devastating medical diagnosis in her 20s. Following a botched abortion, performed at the insistence of a producer who threatened to fire her from a Broadway show if she continued the pregnancy, Bankhead developed a severe infection that required an emergency hysterectomy. This procedure, performed when she was just 30, permanently ended any possibility of biological children. Bankhead's close friend Patsy Kelly later revealed that Bankhead's infamous quote, "I'm as pure as the driven slush," originated after a doctor callously told her she was damaged goods following her hysterectomy. According to Kelly, Tallulah's entire wild child persona intensified after she learned she could never have children. If she couldn't be a conventional woman, she'd be the exact opposite. What makes Bankhead's case particularly poignant is how she channeled her maternal instincts into unconventional family structures. Throughout her career, she maintained a household of struggling young actors, writers, and artists whom she supported financially and emotionally. Her home in New York became known as Tallulah's Orphanage within theatrical circles, a haven for talented misfits who needed guidance and support. In her autobiography, Bankhead briefly addressed her childlessness with characteristic deflection. "Darling, they say I would have made a terrible mother. Perhaps they're right, but I would have loved to have had the chance to prove them wrong." This rare moment of vulnerability offers a glimpse of the woman behind the carefully constructed facade of scandal and sensation. Theater historian Brooks Peters noted that Bankhead's most maternal performances came late in her career, particularly her portrayal of Regina Giddens in The Little Foxes. The predatory mother she created was complex precisely because it reflected Bankhead's complicated feelings about the motherhood she never experienced, a combination of idealization and bitterness that gave the performance unusual depth. 12. Deborah Kerr, the perfect mother who never was. Deborah Kerr's screen persona exemplified a particular type of refined, proper British womanhood, often playing the perfect wife and mother in films like The King and I and An Affair to Remember. This typecasting in maternal roles created a painful irony, as Kerr privately struggled with infertility throughout her first marriage to Anthony Bartlett. Kerr's journey toward motherhood included multiple miscarriages and extensive fertility treatments during the 1940s, a time when such issues were rarely discussed publicly. According to her personal correspondence with her sister Bridget, each loss deepened Kerr's determination to become a mother, creating a cycle of hope and devastation that affected her emotional health while she maintained her composed public image. What few people realize is that Kerr's two daughters with her second husband, Peter Viertel, came through adoption rather than biological birth, a fact Kerr kept private during her lifetime to protect her children from unwanted publicity. Her experience with adoption gave her particular empathy for women struggling with infertility, and she became a quiet but significant supporter of adoption rights organizations. What makes Kerr's case particularly interesting is how her maternal screen roles both comforted and pained her during her struggles with infertility. According to her biographer Eric Braun, Kerr once confided that playing mothers on screen was both therapy and torture, allowing me to experience motherhood vicariously while reminding me of what I feared I might never have in real life. Kerr's most poignant maternal performance came in The Chalk Garden, 1964, where she played a woman whose checkered past prevents her from having her own children, forcing her to channel her maternal instincts into caring for someone else's troubled child. This role, coming after her own adoption experiences, had special resonance for Kerr, who later described it as the closest I've come to playing myself on screen. In a rare 1984 interview addressing her private life, Kerr acknowledged her earlier struggles. "The years of trying to become a mother were the most difficult of my life. Everyone saw the composed, capable woman on screen, while I was falling apart inside with each disappointment. Eventually, finding my daughters through adoption healed something I thought would remain broken forever. But I never forget what that waiting and uncertainty felt like. It shapes you permanently. 13. Rosalind Russell, the comedian's serious struggle. Rosalind Russell created some of cinema's most memorable career women, particularly her iconic role as fast-talking reporter Hildy Johnson in His Girl Friday, 1940. Her screen persona often featured independent professional women who seemed uninterested in conventional domesticity. This image contrasted sharply with Russell's private yearning for motherhood, a desire fulfilled only partially and after tremendous struggle. Russell's marriage to producer Frederick Bresson was, by Hollywood standards, remarkably stable and loving. What remained private during her lifetime was the couple's decade-long struggle with infertility. According to Russell's posthumously published autobiography, Life is a Banquet, she underwent multiple surgeries and experimental treatments throughout the 1940s in her quest to become pregnant. The couple eventually adopted a son, Lance, in 1943, bringing Russell tremendous joy. However, her desire for a larger family continued. In a surprise development, Russell conceived naturally and gave birth to a daughter at age 41, only to have the infant die within hours of delivery. This devastating loss was kept completely secret from the public, with Russell returning to work on Sister Kenny just weeks later, her grief entirely private. What makes Russell's case particularly significant is how her personal experiences influenced her advocacy work. After her own struggles, Russell became a pioneering advocate for adoption reform, using her celebrity to challenge the stigma surrounding adoption and to promote less restrictive adoption laws. The Adoption Foundation she established with her husband in 1955 helped thousands of children find homes through financial support and public education campaigns. Film historian Janine Bassinger notes that Russell's comedic roles often featured career women who seemed dismissive of motherhood, creating an ironic contrast with her private maternal yearnings. This disconnect between her screen persona and personal desires highlights how studios crafted images for actresses that often contradicted their actual lives. In her final interview before her death from breast cancer in 1976, Russell reflected on her life's priorities. "People remember me for my career, but my greatest achievement was becoming a mother, something that came only after years of heartbreak and perseverance. The roles I'm proudest of were never captured on film." 14. Paulette Goddard, the independent woman's secret sorrow. Paulette Goddard's screen persona epitomized the smart, resourceful woman who could match wits with any man, particularly in her collaborations with Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times and The Great Dictator. Her remarkable business acumen and investment skills made her one of Hollywood's wealthiest actresses. With a personal fortune she largely built herself. This image of complete self-sufficiency masked Goddard's private disappointment over never having children. Goddard's most significant relationship was her marriage to Charlie Chaplin from 1936 to 1942. What remained hidden until the publication of Chaplin's private papers was that Goddard had experienced 2 miscarriages during their marriage. According to Chaplin's son, Charles Jr., his father had been eager to have children with Goddard, but her pregnancy losses contributed to the strain that eventually ended their marriage. Goddard's subsequent marriages to Burgess Meredith and novelist Eric Maria Remarque included attempts to conceive, but she never carried a pregnancy to term. By the time she married Remarque in 1958 at age 47, she had reluctantly accepted her childlessness. What few people realize is that Goddard and Remarque seriously explored adoption, going so far as to complete preliminary paperwork before ultimately deciding against it due to their ages and Remarque's poor health. What makes Goddard's case particularly interesting is how she redirected her maternal instincts. Unlike many actresses who channeled these feelings into mentoring younger performers or charitable work with children, Goddard focused on education. Her remarkable $20 million bequest to New York University, equivalent to approximately $50 million today, established scholarship funds specifically designed to support female students pursuing careers in male-dominated fields. According to her friend and fellow actress Louisa Rayner, Goddard once explained this philanthropy by saying, "I couldn't have my own children, but I can help educate thousands of other people's daughters." That's a different kind of legacy, but still a meaningful one. This transformation of personal disappointment into generational impact reveals the depth behind Goddard's seemingly carefree public image. In private correspondence with Remarque discovered after her death, Goddard expressed her complex feelings about childlessness. "Not having children remains my life's greatest sorrow, but I've tried to create meaning from that absence. Perhaps if I'd had children, I wouldn't have developed the independence and business sense that has allowed me to help so many others. We never know how different paths might have unfolded. Now, here's what most people don't understand about these actresses' childlessness. Their private regret over not having children significantly influenced their artistic choices in ways film historians have rarely acknowledged. Many deliberately sought maternal roles to experience motherhood vicariously, bringing extraordinary emotional depth to these performances, precisely because they represented something profoundly desired but unachieved in their personal lives. Katharine Hepburn's portrayal of a spinster finding fulfillment through her nephew in Summertime, Greta Garbo's performance as the self-sacrificing mother in Anna Karenina, and Barbara Stanwyck's fierce maternal protectiveness in Stella Dallas weren't simply acting. They were explorations of the actress's own complex feelings about the motherhood they never experienced. Even more revealing, many of these women established alternative forms of nurturing that transformed their maternal regret into broader social impact. They founded children's charities, mentored younger performers, and created artistic legacies that influenced generations. While they couldn't have biological children, they found ways to channel their maternal instincts into contributions that sometimes affected more lives than individual motherhood might have. This doesn't mean they didn't experience genuine grief over their childlessness, but rather that they transformed this private sorrow into alternative expressions of nurturing and generativity. Understanding this dimension of these legendary actresses' lives adds crucial context to their artistic legacy and personal choices. Their childlessness wasn't simply a biographical footnote, but a profound influence on both their art and their philanthropy, creating ripple effects that continue to shape culture today. We began by asking who these Golden Age actresses were who privately mourned the children they never had, and how they navigated the conflict between their professional ambitions and unfulfilled maternal desires. What we've discovered is a group of remarkable women who faced impossible choices in an era when society and the studio system often made motherhood and career success mutually exclusive for women. From Katharine Hepburn's revelation that her independence masked profound regret to Greta Garbo's secret nursery for children who never arrived, these stories reveal the complex reality behind carefully crafted public images. These weren't simply glamorous stars who had it all, but women forced to make wrenching choices in a system that didn't allow them the same opportunities as their male counterparts, who freely combined fatherhood with career success. What makes these stories particularly significant is how these women transformed their private grief into various forms of creative and philanthropic expression. Whether channeling their maternal instincts into mentoring younger performers, establishing children's foundations, or bringing extraordinary emotional depth to maternal roles on screen, they found ways to express nurturing impulses despite their biological childlessness. The legacies of these women extend far beyond their films. Their childlessness, while personally painful, often freed them to create different kinds of lasting impact. Through art that continues to move audiences, charitable foundations that continue supporting children today, and pioneering career paths that expanded possibilities for future generations of women. While they may have regretted not having children of their own, many ultimately created legacies that influenced more lives than individual motherhood might have allowed. As we reflect on these legendary performers, we're reminded that behind the glamorous images were complex women navigating difficult choices in an era with limited options. Their regrets humanize them, revealing vulnerable women behind the iconic screen personas. Understanding this dimension of their lives doesn't diminish their achievements, but adds crucial context to their artistic contributions and personal choices. If you appreciated this exploration of Hollywood's hidden history, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content examining the fascinating and sometimes poignant truth behind classic cinema. Leave a comment sharing which of these actresses' stories most affected you, or suggesting other aspects of Golden Age Hollywood you'd like us to explore. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next journey beyond the glittering facade of Hollywood's Golden Age.